welcome back to the 80 Proof Podcast. I decided that now is the time that we are back.
You don't get to decide these things.
I do
Only because it's your show and it's
and my birthday,
and your birthday,
in at least 2 countries.
But it's not your birthday here, man.
It is in spirit.
Fair enough.
So, news topic time, or we could make drinking rules. Do we need drinking rules this podcast? Because I don't think we do. I think that I'm just going to drink whenever I damn well please.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Drink right goddamn now, Nick.
I don't have a drink.
You sack
I don't have money.
of shit.
Fair enough.
Can't we all just get along? I'm drinking water, guys, because it's still 9:20 a.m. here.
Yeah, I sort of
You
feel
don't want to
bad.
start with whiskey first thing in the morning?
ZiggyD, dude, you know you can't drink all day if you don't start first thing in the morning, so...
That is
He
true,
has a
pal.
point.
I like to start at 11 a.m. at the earliest if I'm having a big day, but that's not something I do very often.
Do you have a job as well as YouTube?
No, YouTube
kind
is
of
my
question
job.
is that?
I freelance
Then-
write a little bit as well.
What you should do then is just drink all day every day, and just record it, and it will
Do
be
you
funny,
realize-
and
do
you
you
can make money
realize-
from that.
That he has at least 10 times our subscriber count. Collectively.
I found out I actually had a job where you could drink while you worked, and I found that if you do drink all day while you're working, there's really no point in working because you just drink away your entire wages.
That
It's
is
really
bad.
easy to do that.
That's even more of a concern when you're on a YouTube wage. Trust me.
My YouTube channel is called 80 Proof Gaming. I sort of have to drink while I work. It's a requirement.
I don't.
But the long story short is that we are in host news time, where the hosts have news stories and we talk about them. That's the whole story. So, I'm going to start with myself because I'm a dick and I am very self-centered. And so thusly, I will start with my own news story, which is Timegate, the creators of Section 8, and they sort of had a hand in Aliens, Colonial Marines. Very sad story that they had a hand in that, but they got wamboozled. They're going bankrupt, not game-rupt. That sounds a lot happier of a term.
They're going Game Grumps.
Could you please explain to me, sir, the difference between what Timegate is compared to the people that made Borderlands? Because aren't they connected in some way? I thought
They
people that
are
made Borderlands
in
also
a
made
very minute way connected. Basically,
Okay.
Gearbox, the company that was in charge of Aliens, Colonial Marines,
Yep.
they got hired to make that game. Then they hired out Section 8, not Section 8, Timegate, to make various portions of Aliens, Colonial Marines. Timegate, they did what they could. They did their thing. They did their part of the game. Unfortunately, Gearbox was in charge of the whole sort of organization of the game itself. And so the parts that Section 8, god damn it, the parts that Timegate made, they were reasonable enough, but they weren't in a huge amount of control over the game itself. Gearbox was in charge of the game itself. And the game itself was complete shit.
Yeah, it looked
And
pretty
it's
rubbish.
hard to differentiate. It's hard to say, this part here, it was this company, and this part here, it was this company. You can't do that. Because we don't have the information.
To be fair, the game was just fucking mess. It doesn't
The game
even
was
matter.
a fucking mess. There's no
It doesn't
individual
matter.
part of that game that was good. So you can't say whatever part that Timegate was in charge of was good, but the rest of it was shit. And you can't say whatever part Gearbox was in charge of was good and the rest was shit. There's no way to pull it apart because they're not giving us the information required. So the entire game was shit and everyone involved did a bad job in their individual part. But
I understand the game still sold quite well, though.
yeah, it had a lot of sales.
Yeah, mostly
But that's
pre-orders.
because that doesn't mean the game was at least in any part, excusable. No part of that game was good. There is no individual part that you can pull out of Aliens Colonial Marines and say, yeah, this part was pretty good. It had promise. Nothing. Nothing was good. Nothing had promise. Fuck anyone that says otherwise. The early
title
press
had promise.
releases were very ambient, and so the ambience of the game was like was really creepy and good early on. But when the game was released, none of that ambience stayed in the game. The shit changed. All the shit that everyone said, yeah, this is pretty cool. I would like to see this game come out. None of that shit stayed in the game. Anyway, it's really sad to see Timegate go bankrupt because Section 8 was so good. The game that they were involved before Aliens Colonial Marines.
So did they go bankrupt as a result of Aliens Colonial Marines, or as a
That's
result
the
of other
theory.
financial
There's no
issues?
way to say, but because Section 8 sold really poorly, you could say that it was a combination of the two. But Section 8 was actually a really good game. It was the first game that I know of that had, when you spawn in, you go into this drop pod that comes down from the sky, and you sort of get to guide the drop pod along so that you could spawn in a selection in a place that's sort of your choosing, but it can get you killed or do you well.
Yep.
So it was the first game I know of that did that, but nonetheless, it was still pretty shitty. To be honest. It didn't sell well. I loved that game, but it still didn't sell well. That's the point. So both games that they produced up to this point sold poorly. Even though Alien Colonial Marines sold reasonably, but it has such a poor reception that they can't get another job at this point. So they're filing for bankruptcy. That does not mean that the company is gone. It means that all of their stocks are up for being purchased, and so they're no longer in control of their future decisions.
Do
Their
they have any other
stockholders
like
are.
IPs or anything they're working on that would go over to people who bought stocks and stuff besides Timegate, I guess?
Section 8.
Section 8.
Section 8 is pretty much all that they've got, and it's not really a valuable piece of IP. To be perfectly honest, even though I loved it, it doesn't mean that it's of any value.
Well then, if you're looking for some cheap game stocks, then maybe Timegate might be one to try and buy out if you happen to be sitting
Me and
on
Nick, man, we're gonna
some
buy
millions.
it. We're gonna buy Section 8.
We're gonna
really-
buy it, and
That's
we're gonna
true.
make the new game. It's gonna be a cross
Legend of
between
Zelda,
The Legend of
Wind
Zelda
Waker.
and Devil May Cry.
It's Wind Waker and Devil May Cry put together. That's it.
Yeah.
Rake in the cash. Rake it all in.
Did we both have exactly the same idea?
Yes, we did. Just now.
Like simultaneously blurt out The Legend of Zelda and Devil May Cry.
That's why we're friends, man. That's why we're friends. Also,
I love.
Wind Waker is bullshit. Wind Waker is the worst game in history. No one liked Wind Waker. Kitty graphics. I'm really trying to get a rise out of Nick, and it's not working.
I was gonna say like why? Why is it the worst game?
He was gonna be perfectly reasonable. You suck, dude. Not getting angry. How dare you?
That you like that game? I'm confused.
I actually really do. I really, really do. But if I ever decided that I didn't, then you would be really confused.
I would.
But I can't convince myself enough to make it a believable lie. I don't think I could ever pull that off. 'Cause I love that game. Aaron, have you ever decided
Yes.
what your story was? Because we've totally killed the shit out of Section 8 Timegate going bankrupt.
Yes, you had. I was kind of, waiting for my turn there.
You have no turn.
Yeah, so, back, I think it was 2 months ago, we talked about this game called Defiance that was tied to a TV show.
We were kind of excited.
Yeah, I was actually quite excited about the possibilities, the things that could happen with the show. So now the show and the game have been released. So we've had our taste. I have not played the game, I'm pretty broke right now, so I have, that's one of the reasons I spend most of my time on free-to-play games. But the uh, the game, from a lot of my gamer friends, has gotten pretty good reviews. There are a lot of people that are playing the hell out of it right now. And the TV show, however, has gotten mixed reviews. And mixed in there are bad and there are mediocre. Nobody's raving about it. And have any of you watched the show or played the game?
I have watched the show pretty heavily. It's good. It's a good show. I mean, like, at first, at the beginning of the first episode, I thought it was like really mediocre, like really the epitome of what a mediocre TV show was. And then, all of a sudden, near the end of the first episode, I saw what was going to happen with the show in the future. And I know Aaron has seen Eureka. Have any of the rest of you seen Eureka? Nobody.
No.
Nobody's seen
Chirping
John's
crickets.
seen Eureka.
It's basically like, okay, there's a character, a lead character, that is the sheriff of a town, of an exceptional town, a town that has all the really intelligent people in it.
Is this called a town called Eureka, or is it called Eureka?
The town is called Eureka,
I think it might be
So
called a
it's
town
also
called Eureka over here.
and the
I've-
show is called Eureka.
Town.
It might have a different name
And it's
in
on
the
Sci-Fi.
UK.
So basically, this
Go ahead.
show is the same story. The show is there's a sheriff, and he is of a town called Eureka, and the town is exceptional, and he is Joe Everyman. The sheriff is Joe Everyman that uses Joe Everyman logic to solve the problems of an exceptional town's problems. And once I realized that that was what they were aiming at, I loved the show. It took a really long time to establish the characters and to say this is what's going on, but once I figured it out, I loved it. And I think this show is going to be a similar story. And
It-
I actually really love the show at this point.
Yeah, the reviews that I've seen on the show, the things that I've read on it, they've all been, I mean, pretty much everybody that is reviewed the show, they were looking for something else when they watched the show. They were looking for Firefly. They were looking
Or
for
Battlestar
Battlestar
Galactica.
Galactica.
Yeah.
And what we got was literally the big thing about Eureka is not really it's not really the town. It's not really the setting. The setting allows us to learn about these characters, and the setting is really interesting in Eureka. The setting is also very interesting in Defiance. I like the comparison between the two. It's really about these characters. What I've watched of the show is I go, okay, they really put effort into creating this setting and creating these characters, and what they're letting us do is get to know these characters in this really kind of fantastic setting. What I am excited for, I was a little I didn't know how they were going to have the interaction work between the TV show and the video game. They said that they were going to interact, but we didn't know, exactly how that was going to play out. They recorded the entire first season before anything was released. So first season was done. There will be no, so what will happen is, I guess, this first season is going to have, there's going to be some stuff that happens as we watch through the episodes, and that might affect the game. And then decisions that you make in the game as this plays out, they are recording second season right now. So events that are happening in the game now will probably affect stuff that we'll see in second season. So it's pretty
that's
cool.
Something interesting to me.
Yeah, they are recording a second season, so we do know that is continuing at this point. So I'm interested to see how this progresses. It's not much of a story there. It's just kind of like how we talked about it earlier. I figured we should bring it back up now that it is actually a thing.
It's not going to be important until second season. They're going to interact, but they're not going to interact first season. The show and the game won't interact until second season.
Well, the game won't affect the show until second season, but
And vice versa.
the show may affect the game in during first season.
The interaction hasn't happened yet between the show and the game, but
Yes.
it can't be understated that the show will interact with the game. The show is the solid narrative that's already been set in stone, and the game is the more fluid ocean side. The water is a thing that interacts with the show, but it's not the rock.
To be honest, to me personally, it just sounds like there's going to be, there's a time schedule of events or changes that will happen in the game, and that will coincide with the show. It doesn't seem particularly interactive to me. But if they somehow pull off some sort of things that happen in a game affect the show in some sort of way thing for season 2, then I will be impressed.
That's the thing,
Have
right?
you,
The show can't interact with the game, but the show is the world building. The writer wrote for the show, and go ahead,
This is,
Aaron.
I just have because I haven't actually talked with you, Ziggy, about this. Have you looked at it at all, or is just learning at it from us at this point?
I've been paying attention to the MMO and the whole idea in general. I'm pretty interested in the concept. My family is watching the show and they seem to be really enjoying it. They enjoy sci-fi sort of series and things like that. So I've been hearing good things from them, and they were interested in the MMO, and I'd mostly been seeing stuff from the MMO. But mostly, I suspect with this sort of things, with this grandiose idea of having an interacting show and game, that both will be fairly low effort in comparison to make up for that effort in concept. But if they're any better than terrible, I'll be somewhat impressed.
I'm so impressed with you, ZiggyD. You can come back anytime. Anytime you want, you can come back on the show. This is true.
Tryon Worlds is the one that was in charge of the video game portion. We've talked a little. We have talked about them previously here. I don't know if you played Rift at all. Definitely played a lot of that, but the way that they handled their in-game events in Rift, I could see actually, where the players could affect what's going on with the world. Be the only way that I see any, kind of interaction between the two. They are taking part in separate cities, halfway across the country or a continent, really, from each other. So I don't expect them to have a dramatic impact, but I'm sure that they will throw little things in there, and it should be interesting as it progresses.
If it's something like they have this event and there's either a success or fail criteria, and then the result of that, based on, say they have a week of this event thing or whatever, maybe it's like a big war or something like that, and then the success or failure of that at the end will affect something in the next season, and that's an interesting concept and should be satisfying for people that are really getting into both the show and MMO.
Yeah, that's what I would expect.
That's what I expect to be going on, yeah. It's a big sort of like, okay, if there are this many victories on this side of the coin, like you pick as a player in the game which faction you're in. And whichever faction has the most victories is the one that influences the show. That's what I really expect, and it's not really a big deal. It's not a huge influence in the show. It's a superficial one. So, John, are you still with us? Can I still hear you, John?
I assume. Can you hear me?
Yep, we're still good. I'm just going to keep checking with John occasionally because he's the one that has the technological issues because he is such a noob. Such an enormous noob.
The problem with spending good money on a good mic. It doesn't always work.
But Nick's topic is next. Nick, Metal Gear Solid, number 5. You have some sort of topic. I don't even have a full grasp on it. That's how...
I don't either. I'm just excited because Metal Gear Solid 5 and New Zelda are both things that are good in my life.
Both things in your life. They're both good. Well, sometimes
The
excitement
trailer for Metal Gear
supersedes.
the trailer for Metal Gear Solid 5 looks really cool, and it looks like they're rebooting Metal Gear, which I feel is a thing that needed to happen quite a while ago, because Metal Gear Solid just got seeping and fat and stupid,
Well,
and
back in the day, before fucking Metal Gear Solid, what's the recent one with this laser sword and the cutting anything?
Metal Gear Rising.
Before Metal Gear Rising, they decided that they were going to make Metal Gear Solid to be a series sort of like James Bond, where all of the developers could have access to it, and it would all have the name Metal Gear Solid, but it would be independent of Metal Gear Solid in that a different developer was making it, which is interesting to me and terrifying to me because Metal Gear Solid is a completely it's a game that in all of its iteration has been inspirational to game designers and people in the game design industry. So if somebody makes it and they make it all of a sudden shit, it's going to be devastating. It's going to hurt me in my heart place.
That was the thing, like Kojima only wanted to make 2 Metal Gear Solid games. He wanted to make 1 and 2, and he wanted 2 to be the end. And then they were like, no, we need to make more, because Konami was like, this is making money, why would we stop making it? So he was like, yeah, whatever, just let the dev team make it without me. And it was a huge disaster, and he was like, nah, fuck this. So, so that's what Metal Gear 3 was. It was like a completely different story, which was a prequel and all that stuff. And then 4 was like Snake is an old man, and he's got like a year to live, and he's gonna die within a few weeks of the end of the mission that you're on and all this crap. Because he wanted to end the story, but now it's coming back again.
I have a thought on this. I wonder if like he wanted to be done. He was like sick. He was sick of the Metal Gear storyline. He was like, God damn it! I know you people really, really, really want me to do this section of things, but I'm not really particularly interested. I want to do my own goddamn thing.
No,
I'm just gonna make this
yeah.
this completely independent thing that I just want to be done with. I just want to be fucking done with it. Whatever, do what you want to do.
Have you played Metal Gear Solid 4?
No, actually, I have not actually played that.
Well, the whole thing is like, it's really pandery, and there's like loads of fan service and crap, and like, it's just like tying off and like cutting all the loose ends of all characters, and like all of the well-loved characters either die or like can't continue on in the story and crap. And it's just like really like Hideo Kojima just like, I really don't want to make these games anymore. I need to end this, right?
So what you're saying is I'm right.
Yeah. But
I am always right. It's always true. All of the topics on the podcast.
The new Metal Gear just looks so cool. Like, I don't know what it is about it. It just looks amazing. The trailer is just really good. And then there's a new Zelda, which is A Link to the Past 2, which is amazing because Zelda has been a bit shit recently. And Link to the Past.
I don't think that any Zelda has been shit ever.
Have you played Skyward Sword? Have you played Skyward Sword? Have you played Skyward Sword?
Yes.
Why does that exist?
I refuse to even acknowledge the fact that any Zelda could not be anything but the best of anything that exists.
Zelda is such a weird series.
Irrational. It's true. But
Like,
I am a Nintendo fanboy from the beginning, and I will not see a Zelda game be shit.
I'm reviewing the Zelda series, and like I'm really looking forward to the hate I'm gonna get with Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword.
I'll give you all the hate. I'll give it all to you.
Or even Ocarina of Time, because I'm gonna criticize that game, and Wind Waker, and Majora's Mask.
You remember how I said that I loved Zelda 2, and that when you did a video that hated Zelda 2, I would be mad? Well, you did the video that hated Zelda 2, and I loved you for it. So, irrationality, it is me.
The thing that's really interesting with A Link to the Past 2 is that it's gonna be more of a game, like Link to the Past was, where it's like focused on being a game, around puzzles and simple game design things. and it looks interesting. Whereas Zelda recently has been really focused on story and things like that, especially in Skyward Sword. There was a load of story in it and loads of exposure and loads of dialogue. So it should be good to get a Zelda that's back to the roots of Zelda and what it originally was. I'm really looking forward to it.
I know
Like,
this
I'm
is
looking
probably going to get me some hate, but like the Zelda games, as a franchise, Zelda has really jumped the shark. As as far as storyline goes, they've completely abandoned the concept of a single storyline, which just makes it completely impossible to follow. I mean, how are you going to go like, okay, Zelda has 3 storylines. This is what you have to follow. There's Zelda storyline on the left, there's Zelda storyline on the middle, and there's Zelda storyline on the right. And you might think I'm crazy, but this is legitimately the Zelda story arc. There's 3 Zelda storylines.
It's because Nintendo are dumb. They don't know what they're doing with the story. And, like, I don't think it worked in the last 2 games when they were like, oh, we're going to have a heavy emphasis on story. Because, like, they don't even have voice acting. So story is just boring and tedious and annoying when they put it in Zelda. And, like, they do things that, like, breaks their own story. So, like, for the game The Minish Cap, which was, like, a little Game Boy game, it, like, explains the story of Link's hat. And then they do Skyward Sword, which is a prequel to that game, and then Link has a hat, even though it was like the origin story for his hat in a game. Like, they made a whole game about his hat, and he wouldn't have had a hat. And there's little things that really piss me off with the story, and it's just, I wish they would stop. And they keep bringing back Ganondorf and, like, making it like Ganon, Link, and Zelda. Why did that? What? I forgot Zelda's name.
You're welcome for me not having any views, because if I had any views on my YouTube channel, you would have all the people hating you right now.
Yeah, it's just they think that that people who play their games are dumb, and they just need to, like, I don't know.
Disagree. I think that their storyline is so complicated, so complex, so many storylines, so much shit, that they can't possibly be trying to assume that we're dumb. Because if we were dumb, we wouldn't be able to follow 2 games. 2 games.
No, but
Any 2 games. Pick 2 games, we wouldn't be able to figure out the connections between the 2.
None of the stories in Zelda is even connected. It's just like, yeah,
They're all connected. You've seen.
It's not really. I've got Hyrule Historia, and it's not really connected. It's just like, oh yeah, it's connected. It's not really. Like,
I think it's fascinating.
It's dumb.
I think that you're dumb, you stupid son bitch.
I like Zelda, but there's just so many dumb things. Dumbness.
Let's skip you and your dumbness. Let's move on to ZiggyD. ZiggyD, what's up, homie?
I was going to talk about the Neverwinter launch. No doubt you guys have been seeing a lot of talk about Neverwinter. It's the new big free-to-play MMO on the block.
The shit
and,
one.
you know, well, I don't know.
I'm just fucking around.
There's mixed opinions about it, but I'll give my opinion about it. You know, it comes from a huge IP, Neverwinter, which is Dungeons and Dragons, for those of you guys who aren't familiar. Because of the naming of it, and because the previous Neverwinter-related games were Neverwinter Nights 1 and 2, which were popular single player, and also multiplayer, actual D&D style RPGs with, you know, heavy D&D in them, like in terms of the gearing, in terms of the classes, in terms of everything you can do, even down to dice rolls being in the background. Now, straight up, Neverwinter Online, the MMO, is not a D&D game at all. It is just set in the Neverwinter, basically, theme. There's some, you know, basic references to D&D that you roll some dice to determine your initial stats, and that the classes and races are kind of similar to D&D and things like that. But other than that and the setting, it is not a D&D game at all. Overall, I think the game is pretty impressive for a free-to-play game. The combat is exceptional, probably the best combat I've ever played in an MMO. Given I haven't played too many MMOs, but still one of the best combat systems I've ever played. Some of the other good systems have potential, and the game overall just seems to be a lot of fun. However, it's wrapped up in a pretty bad microtransaction system. Have you
think
any
that
of
I
you
have a
guys
relevant
played?
objection. I
Yeah,
played a
go ahead.
lot of pen and paper RPGs in my time. A lot. A lot. I mean, I have created my own pen and paper RPG, and then one of my friends that I played pen and paper RPGs with at the time also made their own pen and paper RPG. Neverwinter Online is not a pen and paper RPG, and it is not an entertain. I mean, it might be entertaining as an MMORPG, but we can't look at it in the perspective of a pen and paper RPG because it's not
Yeah, well,
going to be that.
that's exactly what
It's
I'm
not
saying.
meant
Yeah.
to be a pen and paper RPG though.
Well, people could be forgiven for thinking that it might have a bit more D&D in it. I actually made a video talking about how much exactly D&D is in the game, and it is very little. There's like, I was even hoping, that maybe they'd have dice rolls going in the background to calculate damage and things like that. But they wanted to go the safer route with, just having your daggers do 10 to 20 damage and things like that.
There's a lot of affection that it gains in my book. Because me and Aaron, we used to talk about what does an MMORPG need to be proficient. And I came up with the concept of player devised dungeons. And Neverwinter has that. It has that
It does.
player devised dungeons. Please tell us, how does
So
it have that?
the Foundry system in Neverwinter essentially allows you to be a DM in the sense that you can create a quest line, a mission, and even to, if you're willing to create multiple of them and link them together, externally, you can create an entire campaign for people to play through. And I think this is the future of Neverwinter in terms of, its longevity, because it's limited in some ways. Like at the moment, people can't effectively put bosses in their maps. They can't control what drops, how much experience things give, all that jazz, because can actually earn in-game experience and currency and everything and items through the Foundry system. So they've decided to go that route and instead to let people balance it. I possibly think that a better route would be to completely remove it from your main character progression, I guess, but to either have a separate sort of character progression, allow people to play it, or just have no bearing on the game, so the balance is an issue, or just eschew balance completely. I mean, it's an MMO. Who cares about balance, really? Just have it be this system that you can go in and play these awesome epic adventures that people have created, with a party.
Here's the concept that I came up with. It's a little complicated, but I think it could work for an MMORPG. What you do is, you put all of the gear that you've come up with, all the gear that you've farmed up in all these dungeons or whatever, and you put it in your guild storage. Now, the only reason that you have this extra storage is because it is the guild storage. And the way this guild storage is vulnerable. You have to have this guild storage, design a dungeon that leads to it. The only way you have extra storage is to design a dungeon that leads to it. And to make a dungeon, it has a certain number of mob points in the room that it's in. You have to spend this number of points. And to spend this number of points, you put NPCs into the room that has the storage. And it's a somewhat ludicrous amount. So you have to have this many level of mobs in the room that stores the chest that has the gear in it. So basically you have to have a dungeon. You have to wind up designing a dungeon that defends the gear that your guild has created. And in other guilds, in other games, like Guild Wars 2, you have to wind up spending a certain number of development points. Like, your guild has to do this much shit to get guild storage. Period. Except in the game that I have conceptualized, that guild storage is vulnerable to attack by other guilds. In Guild Wars 2, there has been sort of like guild-to-guild combat. So, first, in order to get access to the guild storage of other guilds, you have to win a guild v guild match. So you fucking fight the other guild, and then you've won against the other guild. Congratulations! This shit has already been established. Then, once you've won the other guild, that gives you access to the other guild's instance, which they have designed with in-game guild v guild. It's hard to define, but there have been games that have made it so that you could make dungeons. So you make your dungeon as a guild. Then you have to lose a guild v guild combat before the other guild has access to your guild v guild dungeon. Then they have to win that to get access to your guild v guild storage. And then once they have won it, they have a random chance to get a completely random item in the guild v guild storage that you've set as your guild to it's like a regular dungeon reward. And a lot of games have made it so that, like, their weakness as a game is that they don't have a lot of end game. Well, if it is to the point where your guild storage is what is your end game, so the other guild beats your guild and they get access to your guild v guild storage, it's the best gear in the game, basically, because that's the storage. That's what you want to put in there, right?
Well, sounds involved but fun. I could see something like that happening in the future.
It's ridiculously technical, and it makes it so that there's infinite end game.
I have
So,
no idea what you just said.
It's
I was
really,
trying to follow, but I was just like, what is this?
it's so hard to describe. It's so hard to describe, but it's a concept that would make it so that there's infinite end game for any MMORPG. And Aaron and I have thought about it. Aaron?
Although, you know, Weasel, you've obviously been drinking.
It's really hard to describe when you've been drinking.
As you should. You know, the concept is that they get a random, they get basically random drops out of, what you have in there. Also, the potential there, too, is if your guild can, build, these good dungeons or whatever, the game, the GMs of the game could be like, hey, here's a piece of loot you can stick in there, to get people to come and play, or or things like that. They, some of the top guilds with some of these crazy dungeons that they've made, they could reward their players for spending all this time basically creating content for them, with fun stuff, that they can use to to get other players to come and play through their stuff, and it makes it. It's an interesting concept. We really do need to spend some time and just write it down one of these days, and so it can actually be tweaked out, so presented to somebody. Because I don't care if somebody wants to take and rip that idea off, and put it into their game. I'd be happy to see it and anxious to play it. I really don't care if they pay me for it. But yeah, no, I'm also excited about this, about Neverwinters, just because it'll be interesting to look at. I probably won't play it myself, but I will probably watch a lot of any of the videos that pop up.
It's the
You did mention
platform.
Ziggy, the micro transactions things. You said it wasn't. You did not like the model for that. Was that correct?
It's not great. Perfect Worlds, you guys probably know from a bunch of other MMOs, and their microtransaction system is known for being pretty very wrapped into the game at every possible opportunity, and that is the case with Neverwinter. Overall, at the very technical level, everything, it's completely free to play. You can experience 100% of the content. It's very, very technically not pay to win because everything can be achieved through normal gameplay. However, the potential for that to happen with certain things, especially the biggest. Okay, so the things people are complaining about and noticing right now early on, since it's only been a week since launch, are things like bag space is limited by microtransactions essentially. Your bank space is limited by microtransactions. You can't respec without microtransactions. Your mounts and stuff, you can get a basic mount, but to upgrade your mounts, you need to go through the microtransaction system in a realistic sense. Otherwise, spending a lot of time to just get one of those things. But the end game one that I think is going to become more known in the future is that there's this rune system for your gear and armor, and these are very powerful runes. And as you're leveling, you combine basic versions of these runes, and you have like a 95% chance to combine them successfully. However, at endgame, these runes have a 1% chance to combine successfully, and these are like, you finish a dungeon, you get one rune drop or something like that, and you combine 4 of them to get the next tier of it. Now, 1% chance each time you try and combine that, and you have to combine it 4 times, is like, effectively nothing. No chance of ever getting that as a free-to-play player. But through the microtransaction systems, you can purchase these wards that allow you 100% success rate at these, and overall to get like one fully combined rune for end game gear is $160. So the people willing to put out a couple instances of $160 can take these runes into PvP and be undefeatable. So PvP will be broken in the future, no doubt, in the game. But otherwise, it's a very good game. The combat in it is super solid. As I said, the most impressive combat system I've ever played, even far and away better than Guild Wars 2, which I quite liked.
I have a huge problem with that, though.
What's
I really
that?
do.
Which
the
part?
idea of I play these games, right, with no money, and I feel guilty about it, playing games that are free to play, but spending no money and trying to be as good as the other people, and I don't feel completely good about that. Like, the people who pay money to the developers, the people who say, here you are relevant, I think that you should get some money. I feel like you should have what you've put into it. You should
It
get
does
that
belittle
back.
your achievement. It belittles your achievement as someone who puts the time in, really.
Right, like, I put the money in, I put the time in, I don't put any actual money. I put no money in, and I put the time in. As a player of that perspective, I feel like I'm just jipping the developer. I'm like, oh, you've gone ahead and you've spent months and months of your time to make this game for me. Me, this person who spends no money on you. But I still go ahead and I don't spend any money. I feel like an ass. I feel like a dick. I feel like I am jipping those people who deserve my money.
So that's a valid counter argument to say that the people that are willing to pay should have things that they can pay for to be able to pay for the people that just are mooching off the developers by playing for free. But however, I think there's so much potential in this sort of game for those microtransactions to just be purely cosmetic, and we have good examples of this in other games. Like Path of Exile is a fantastic example of successful purely cosmetic microtransaction system, especially in a D&D game where people want to get together in their groups. They want to all look individual. The game itself actually doesn't have too much visual customization of players in the game yet. So having like just a huge market of like different clothing, different town clothing, different looks and expressions, so you have this really custom-made avatar like you would if you were playing tabletop RPG, so you can get together with your guild and you can even role play it out and stuff like that. I think people would be able to spend tons of money on that without ever feeling guilty like they're paying for an advantage or things like that. But just Perfect World seem to really enjoy offering as much advantage as they can while still technically not being paid to win.
So these people who make these games out of the generosity of their own hearts. They make it because they fucking love these games. Path of Exile is a great example because they're just, if they wanted to make money, they would do it a completely different way than they've done it. John, you still here?
No.
Great.
It doesn't seem like he is.
Can you hear my mic now?
Yeah.
Yeah, there he is.
There you go.
So
Yay.
John and I, we are of a mind in the example of Path of Exile. If you were wanting to make money off of Path of Exile, you would do it in a totally different way. but they're doing it in the way they are because they have a love for action RPGs. If they wanted to fucking do it to make money, they would definitely not do it the way they're doing it. Definitely.
I disagree though, because I think for long-term profitability, the way they're doing it is much more sustainable. A system like Neverwinter, where you can, or like other MMOs where you can pay for an advantage, or even if the game is pay to progress, you're isolating a lot of player base that might potentially one day spend money, but now can't. You can make a lot of money short-term with a more intrusive microtransaction system, but I think long-term, the cosmetic route of non-pay-to-win sort of stuff, I think, is the best way economically even.
So
So yes, they're doing it out of the love of their game, but
do
I
you
think
think
also
the
it
way
makes
they're
sense.
doing it is actually for the goal of making money?
Well, that's why
With Path of Exile,
Yeah, in
mean?
the example of Path of Exile, do you think that they're doing it the way they're doing it to make money in the long term?
I think their goal is to be sustainable in the long term, so they can continue to make the game that they've always wanted, which is makes sense. These two things don't have to be at odds with each other. You can make a game you love, but also have it be long-term viable. But if you instead your goal is just to make money, then you might take the short route profitable option.
See,
Especially if you're a developer that churns out constant MMOs like Perfect Worlds does. Basically, they take over MMOs that have been in developed by other companies like Neverwinter, and
your
put their
perspective is that
system in it.
if you're thinking long term, that the ways that they're doing it is smarter. Like long term thinking, they're gonna make more money the way that they're doing it than the way other MMORPGs like say Diablo 3. Diablo 3 is doing it for the short term monetary gain. But in the example of Path of Exile, they're making a game that is a better game, and so they make more money in the long term. Because they're fucking smart, fucking douchebags.
See, I don't even know then if it's smartness, because I guess it depends on how you define smartness, because maybe Perfect Worlds are really smart. Maybe they see that the MMO industry is becoming increasingly disposable, and to make a MMO that's fun for a year or so and that can make a lot of money in that year, maybe that is the smart route. If they instead said we're going to make a game with a really just purely cosmetic microtransaction system that and we're going to try and aim it at having like a shelf life of 10 years, then maybe that isn't so smart, because instead there's going to be a bunch of new MMOs coming out and player base is just going to shift around anyway. Like, I don't think there's going to be more WoWs in the future. There's not going to be any more 10-year MMOs. Maybe they are smart because they're seeing it as the game MMOs are becoming pretty disposable.
This is an incredibly relevant topic for conversation. I feel like Path of Exile is on the right choice because I love Path of Exile, and so I obviously pick them over the opponents of Path of Exile. And I hated Diablo 3 while I loved Diablo 2. So it's like, it's a pretty obvious decision for me. But I feel like the obvious decision isn't where the conversation is. You have to have a contrasting perspective, or else it's not a very relevant conversation to have.
Well, I think for Path of Exile, maybe that's a smart choice for action RPGs as well, because I think the action RPG gamer wants a game that's going to be around a long time, so they can sink a lot of time into it, and a cosmetic microtransaction system for that makes sense. So, maybe it was just a case that the different genres suit different microtransaction systems.
I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit because we had our host topics for later, and I wanted to talk about microtransactions and some of the trending that I'm seeing in video games. And one of the things that you mentioned is pay to win.
Yep.
One of the things that I was really, really frustrated with when I first started playing World of Tanks was that they had the gold rounds, the money, the rounds that you had to pay real money to purchase. They have since moved away from that. You can now purchase those with either real money or with in-game money. So you now effectively do get the everything is free to play that way. One of the things that I'm seeing now is people complaining that everybody is using those gold rounds. They still refer to them as gold rounds, but because now you don't have to pay to win, but you can still use those rounds, and that's breaking, unbalancing the game, that kind of thing. But the point that I wanted to talk about was that they had that pay to win mechanic in there. They've made the decision I think is the right decision and removed that from their game. But the model that they have, one of the things that I think is great about the World of Tanks, as far as longevity goes, is that they will continue to make money because people will pay for that. They'll pay for the premium tanks. They'll, the premium accounts and things like that. They have things in there that people will pay for, but it's also a game that they can continually change over time. And if they need to completely re-update their system eventually, they can do that. So that's another one of those games that I think that one's still going to be around in the future. It's still going to be a relevant game here in the next 4 to 5 years. The MMOs, though, I mean, how many have we seen come and go in the last year and a half? Year and a half in particular. So many have come up and just disappeared. Rift, that other game that I don't like to talk about, the Old Republic, came in, was the traditional model of monthly subscription, and now they've changed over to the free-to-play microtransaction model. I haven't even looked at it. I refuse to because they pissed me off so bad when they did all of that. But what do you guys think is going to be the more prevalent system? Are we even ever going to see another monthly subscription MMO, or is that model done?
It's gonna come back. It's gonna be a thing that exists forever. People are gonna want to be a monthly. They're gonna start as, I'd like to be a thing that people pay once a month for. I would love to be so fantastically good that people want to pay every single month to keep access to my content.
I think it'll have to be something completely unique for that to happen again, for it to be, the monthly payment model success that World of Warcraft had. So I'm thinking like, very, very future generation sort of gaming. Far away down the track. For now, though, I don't think we'll ever see another successful subscription model on a large basis that's widely popular.
I think that me and you, we need to have an argument because we're having the opposite. It's completely the contrary perspective. I think that to have an agreement, me and you, we gotta fight with our fists.
Everything resorts to violence with him, by the way, so...
Everything has to be violence, yes.
Can I suggest something, Nathan?
Isn't he drinking like whiskey? That's fight juice.
Is that, if you want to argue with somebody, you should probably be sober when you do, because otherwise you just look like an idiot.
Fuck you!
I'm completely sober and coherent, so... but no,
I'll still win.
But I want to answer the original question with a question, because I'm a jerk like that.
I like that, actually, so...
The question I'd like to pose to you is that whether this, increasing trend towards free-to-play with microtransaction systems, especially the quick buck style microtransaction system where you're getting the pay-to-win stuff, you pay big money for the stuff initially, look impressive for a few months, and then move to another MMO. Is that a response to the industry, or is the industry responding to that? So are people, is developers' greed getting the better of them and they're trying to make a quick buck, and then people are disposing of the MMOs after they realize they have no end game? Or are the people wanting constantly the new thing, just like they are in other game genres, I guess? And so the developers instead say, well, we can't go, the old model now doesn't work, we need to try and make a quick buck.
Here's the
That's the
question.
question.
Are you necessarily disagreeing with me?
Well, one of the things that is out there, one of the things that I think is being missed is that there are multiple different types of gamers. And what I like, especially, me with games, I come into a game, I really like it, and then they start changing the game because it only attracted my style of gamer, or or that kind of close. And so they were like, okay, well, we need to get this other group to come play our game. And so they change the game and they run me off and they get the other group. And then they're like, oh, well, we need to increase our player base, so we got to change it again to get these people. And they run that group off to get that other group. It's the same thing with the microtransactions. Like, there are the people out there who, like me, it's like, okay, you've made a game that I like. I will do a couple of microtransactions to make it fit, to kind of give you money, support you, and I get this little cool thing that you offered me that really doesn't change the game. It just changes my experience a little bit. And that's how I am with microtransactions. That's how I interact with the game. And then they're like, oh no, we want the guys that are going to spend more money. They're going to do the pay to win. So they tweak, they add something, and then they run me off. There are those types of gamers, and and honestly, I think there's probably a lot more money to be made off of them. But that's one of the big things. They really just need to go, okay, this is the gamer that we want. This is the kind of community that we want, and go with that, and not wish-wash back and forth, which is what I'm seeing. Is they're like, oh, do we want to be this way or do we want to be this way? Because we want to try and get both groups into the same game. You're not going to get them to play together. We don't like the other people. They don't like us. We don't like them.
Care Bears don't like the hardcore. This is the lesson that I'm hearing.
Does that make sense?
It actually makes a lot more sense than I expected.
I think that's the easier route, and a lot of games, will take the appeal to either Timmy, Johnny, or Spike. If you guys are unfamiliar, the power gamer, or the different class of gamers and what they prefer, how they prefer to play. But I think there is room for games that are trying to make a long-term stand to have aspects for each of those gamers. MMOs especially can have such a variety of gameplay in them that they can attract the different types of gamers. But as for the microtransactions thing, I'm not sure if that fits into it. They need to go for the older route of microtransaction system. Yeah, the longer lasting one, if they want to attract all three audiences.
Yes.
John, you got a topic for the news for this month?
I like working now.
He's kind of there.
There we go.
He's here. He's been
Okay,
here.
I can hear myself again. Good. Well, I wanted to contribute to the microtransaction stuff too, actually. I wanted to throw out that League of Legends was a good example of the cosmetic things for a long-term game, and a good way to keep your player base around.
John, League of Legends has been a fantastic example of microtransactions. They've been a beacon, a shiny beacon that we could lift onto a pedestal of how you could successfully do microtransactions. But why?
Why what? Why do I like it?
Why
I like
are they
it.
successful?
Well, they have a good game that lasts a long time, and they're not obtrusive.
That's true. They don't put up a fucking icon on your screen. They don't say, hey, error message. Here's a message to you. Hey, guess what? If you want to support us, you could go ahead and you could give us money. They don't do that. But you know they're there. They know at any given time. You know, as a player of League of Legends, if I wanted to go ahead and spend some money, it would be there. It's there in the background. I could look prettier than the other guy. More voice acting, all the things. So why is that acceptable? I guess the real question is, why is that acceptable? While in other games that are free, they do systems that are similar, but it's not quite so palatable.
Well,
I don't really think they're limiting you in any way in League of Legends, whereas the ones that are considered unpalatable are limiting your gameplay experience. You, in League of Legends, you're limited to what heroes you can use unless you've unlocked them all. You can unlock them through gameplay, and most of the time that's seen as reasonable in most games, but then that depends on the amount of time and whether it's feasible for most players to unlock the heroes they want.
That's the thing.
With those,
If
with-
you want to
with-
pick a specific hero in League of Legends, you're like, okay, I really, really like Anivia. Ah, she gets me off with her fucking ice phoenixy goodness. She doesn't die. She dies, but she comes right the fuck back. I really want to be Anivia. So you're like, okay, fuck it, I'm gonna unlock Anivia. It takes, okay, say, 3,600. I don't know really how much she costs. John, do you know how much she costs? It's a certain
Sure.
amount. It's a very specific amount. At the very most, it's 6,300. That's the most any individual champion costs. So you play that many games. In a game, you might get, say, 3,000 some odd, or 300 and some odd IP in a game for first win. That means that's at the most 10 days worth of playing one game per day to unlock it. That's completely feasible for any individual person. 10
Yeah,
days
that's
to
it.
unlock one character is super easy for any individual character. That's the thing. When you play a game, you pick a thing that you want. You pick this one thing that you want. 10 days worth of effort for one thing that you really want isn't particularly difficult. And that's the difference, in my opinion. John, help me out here. What do you think?
John's mic isn't working. Stop
John
asking
is
for
a
it.
son of a bitch. I will fight him. Me and him.
I'm
We'll
sorry,
box.
John.
I'm boxing him presently. He lost. I beat the shit out of him and I won.
All right, so I think we've covered in enough depth the microtransaction thing for now. It's a huge topic, but
that was a lot of depth. In
Yeah,
a
it's
really
pretty good.
unstructured way.
Pretty good. I feel good.
We covered every topic in like a really like weird way.
And it was all good. All
It's
the
beautiful.
ways in which we covered a topic were fantastic. In the perspective of Nathan Philip Oslenski.
How did we get onto that? That was never winter.
I don't know, man. We're the best.
yeah, well, we transitioned into Aaron's topic of RMT and free-to-play models, which is nice. It's always nice to transition.
So break time. We're going to go do the things that we have to do during breaks. And then we'll be back for host topics in approximately an amount of minutes.